Tag TV and Tag Radio be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Imagine devices that give you the power to feel. A set of tactile, pressure, and force-sensitive touch technologies that will provide innovative new ways of interacting with electronic devices. What if? What if technology could restore the sensation of touch to an amputee? What if a recent startup right here in Atlanta was focused on creating new methods of human-machine interaction? Enter the imagination of NextInput and enter the reality of force and pressure-sensitive touch technology that is being developed right here, right now. Greetings, everyone. It's Friday, June 22nd, 2012, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. We first started hearing the buzz at last year's business launch competition, a new cluster of big-thinking Georgia Tech young pioneers exploring new ways of delivering rich human-machine interaction and enabling 3D touch surfaces. They believe they could be the touch surface for next-generation touchscreen devices, smartphones, tablets, PCs, PDAs, and more. Well, wait till you hear what's happened to the startup. Now it's about to roar. Up to the Tech Talk, we speak once again, as we did a little more than 12 months ago with Ian Campbell, co-founder of NextInput, now a Georgia Tech Advanced Technology Development Center superstar that has found seed capital, a new CEO and CTO, and is already marketing next-generation force-sensitive touch solutions with plans to rapidly expand into next year to become an industry innovation leader. Ian is an experienced product and technology developer and has brought dozens of successful products to market around the globe for companies like Nokia. And in fact, he's even served as an embedded systems engineer at Georgia Tech's Aerospace Systems Design Laboratory, and as a management consultant for Booz Allen and later for Volume Prism Consulting. Ian has even consulted with Microsoft in strategy, operations, sales, and product development. Why does it take 100 clicks to scroll through a document? Problem solved. 5 presses to fast forward through commercials? Well, not anymore. Can the sensation of touch be restored to an amputee? The Tech Talk asked the question, life is tactile, why aren't devices? The answer, NextInput, and the future of devices with the power to feel, as we visit a dreamer that is proving to be one of Atlanta's most innovative doers. NextInput company co-founder and COO, Ian Campbell. Ian, welcome to Tech Talk.
Hey, Frank. Thanks for having me on.
You know, we've had an opportunity to explore this subject before, sometime back, I guess about a year or so ago, but it's a wonderment of a subject. I'm trying to stumble on a word because it's the commercialization of next-generation force-sensitive touch solutions. And I think any one of us that are dealing with even a smartphone or any computers or devices that are ATMs and those kind of things certainly know it for what we understand it to be today. But tell us a little bit about where you're at, where it's at, and a little more about the industry.
Yeah, sure. So I think the last time we spoke was right after the GRA Tag Business Launch Competition last year, 2011. Yeah, so you're right. It's been about a year since we last talked. Just to get you caught up on where NextInput's at now. First of all, we changed the name. It was Viscid Tech when we were in the Business Launch Competition. We since added 2 additional co-founders. Don Metzger is a seasoned entrepreneur out in Silicon Valley. He's got about 3 decades in the consumer electronics space. And then we also added Ryan Dieselhorst as a CTO. He's a PhD candidate here at Georgia Tech. We also secured our seed funding, so we're excited to report that. Yep, and we brought on some additional team members, kind of put down roots here at the Advanced Technology Development Center at Georgia Tech. We've completed some really important prototypes and proofs of concepts that we're sharing with our customers, and we're beginning to book some of our first customer revenues. So all of that's pretty exciting. But more broadly, the touch technology industry is seeing some interesting changes. We're all familiar with touch tech now. If you get an iPhone or an iPad, that's what's actually driving the interface
Sure.
of your device. And we think that touch technology's been around forever, but in reality, it's only about a decade old, and capacitive solutions that are in your iPhone or iPad are only about 3 or 4 years old. So there's still a lot of room for improvement in that technology, and that's really what NextInput's focused on. We're focused on developing the next generation of touch technology that'll go into future iPhones and iPads and a variety of other things.
Now, there's a term that you call from the standpoint of the actual sensitivity to the touch, how hard you touch, where you touch at a certain point, that can actually signal the device differently than it would if you touched it some other way. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So our solution is called Force Touch, and it has the ability to recognize not only the location of the touch event along a touch screen, but actually how hard you're pressing into that touch screen. And it's extremely sensitive. So that lets us do what we call 3D gesturing, so gestures that respond not only to X and Y location, but actually how hard you're pressing in. That allows you to do things like scrolling around in a map a little easier, or a long website. Like imagine instead of having to continually swipe scroll with one finger on the touch screen and the other hand holding the device, you can just press down with your thumb and match your reading rate with your scroll rate just by pressing down a little bit harder or a little bit softer. So those are just a few trivial examples. We've got literally a book full of different 3D gestures that we're out there pitching to major world-class customers that can use.
I would say probably for at least a decade, I would think it's been that long, there's just been this almost a war between touch and voice. And is that a situation where you see one conquering the other, or is it always going to be compatible, or a case where certain things are driven better by voice recognition and others are done by touch? Certainly you've considered that from a standpoint of a competitive standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. We really see 3 emerging interfaces, touch, gesture, waving your hand in front of a Kinect, for example, and voice, which is, Siri is sort of the cutting edge of voice recognition, voice interface. Mm-hmm. And we don't really see those as being in conflict or competition, but more complementary technologies. And they work together to kind of make the user experience for an electronic device like an iPad or an iPhone richer. So there are instances where you'd want to be able to talk to Siri, for example, but there's also instances when you'd want to, play Angry Birds on a touchscreen. So I think they'll always be in kind of combination with one another. From
a marketing penetration standpoint, how do you introduce your product into an environment? Is it obviously I'm going to assume a form of an application that's embedded into another situation that it embellishes or enhances, but is that a collaborative effort, or how do you identify business prospects?
Yeah, that's another great question. We're commercializing hardware at the base level, our sensors themselves. We also own the firmware and drivers that interface with an operating system like iOS on an iPhone. We've got really a full solution stack that we're pitching to potential commercialization partners. And we really can't do it without having these commercialization partners entering into what we're calling a joint development agreement. And the way that works is, they end up buying a period of market exclusivity. There's a licensing agreement that's put in place, and we actually integrate our solutions into their products. So if you go check out our website, nextinput.com, you can actually see some of these proofs of concept that we've shown these customers. Those prototypes and proofs of concepts actually form the basis of evaluation kits and reference designs that will go into something like an iPhone or an iPad or PC, laptop, mouse pad, and a variety of different applications.
That's really fascinating. I mean, how do you identify the prospects? Do they come to you looking for the technology? You go to them, a little bit of both? And when you talk about a specific vertical, if you can do it, share with us an example that we would have found on NextInput. I'm sure that a lot of people after our conversation will go to, it's nextinput.com, and it's spelled just exactly the way it sounds, nextinput.com. But give us an example of that, because I think that from a marketing standpoint, or at least a business development and customer acquisition standpoint, I wouldn't say it's unique. I'm sure there's other people that are doing it that way, but I think most of us are not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's a very niche approach, niche strategy. And the best way I could define it is just classic networking and business development. So the first thing we did is we went and hired a CEO. That was Don Metzger, who I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got that deep network into all these consumer electronics manufacturers. And then it's just a matter of getting in front of their engineering teams, getting in front of their business development teams, and actually making the case for NextInput. I mean, it's a B2B challenge, marketing challenge. And the easy part of it is, we only have a few customers that we're really going after, and we only have to get a few of them to bite. But that's also sort of the challenging part of it, because
well, what about competition? I mean, does Force Touch in some variation or another? Certainly, it has competition. So
yeah,
there's got to be not only the contact and the relationship building that you're talking about as far as networking is concerned, but then obviously there's a product-to-product type competition in terms of value propositions and cost and et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. NextInput, we compete against kind of technology solution stacks. There's a lot of different providers out there pitching different touch technology solutions. There's maybe 8 top touch solutions, Capacitive being the market leader. So we're really competing against technology rather than individual competitors. But our business case is, look, we can provide you some manufacturing benefits. We can improve performance, reduce cost. We can also improve the user experience. So we've got kind of that two-edged sword that a lot of these other technologies don't really have.
What does the product actually look like? Is it something that you obviously it's something you can physically see, right? I mean, so it's manufactured and I mean, describe that to us, because I mean, again, it sounds naive to say this, but I mean, obviously I use touch every day, but I never give a thought about what it is I'm doing in terms of how I'm driving it to take action. Yeah,
and that's the way it should be. Like the end consumer that's buying these devices, you shouldn't have to know how it works. It should just work. And that's what our solutions do.
So you're going to keep it a secret and not tell us?
Well, it's powered by what are called MEMS devices. It's these very small micro electromechanical systems. And they're manufactured the same way that a semiconductor chip would be manufactured, except they have the ability to sense force. And when they come under force, applying a load, imagine standing on your bathroom scale at home. It can detect how much weight's on there. And some people like me have a little bit more that they need to get rid of. But, these sensors work exactly the same way, except on a much, much, much smaller scale, small enough to actually be integrated into a touch screen.
And in that touch screen, that same contact point is in every place where I put where touch is activated? Or is it like a matrix that covers an entire screen, say, for like a dashboard?
It's the latter. So it's like a matrix that actually goes underneath the display.
Fascinating. Now, let's talk a little bit about, obviously, when you're talking about a technology like this, it's got to be evolving. So the other side of it is, as much as you've progressed even within the short period of time of a year, you're looking at even what is the next thing that's going to happen for Force Touch or in the next area of touch. But let's talk a little bit about where that kind of thought leadership and that kind of collaboration and that kind of, I would assume, technical support comes from. And I guess where I'm headed is location. When you're talking about a startup and you're looking for the right place to put that seed to bloom into a place where you're ideally going to be planted for some time, you guys are headquartered here out of Georgia, is that correct?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit, or tell our audience a little bit about why that's the case.
Well, I think it's why there's a number of other high-tech companies that are kind of growing up in Midtown and right next to Georgia Tech and in the Advanced Technology Development Center. So, we're Georgia Tech guys. We use the Georgia Tech resources quite a bit. We use all the resources that TAG and the Georgia Research Alliance have made available to startup companies. So that's really, it was kind of a no-brainer to locate here in Midtown and here at the Advanced Technology Development Center. And, looking around the country, I've seen other high-tech incubators around the country, and there's kind of a unique collaborative spirit here at ATDC in the Atlanta area that we find really helpful. So we're constantly over across on the Georgia Tech campus talking to some of the thought leaders in this space, professors over there that have their own labs.
Mm-hmm.
We make use of some of the lab facilities to actually get our prototypes and proofs of concepts developed. So it's something that really wouldn't be possible anywhere else.
Now, you've talked a lot about business development, a lot of preparation in terms of the technology, also setting up with some of the new members of the team that you've put together, which, by the way, sound incredibly impressive. Tell us a little bit about when TouchForce will be available in the market.
Well, Force Touch, we're actually selling solutions into the marketplace now. But, you know, those early deals will be at the manufacturer level. Consumers should start seeing Force Touch applications in 2013. And then we hope to have touchscreen, full touchscreen implementation by 2014 and beyond.
Now, we talked a little bit about the future. I can only begin to imagine how you, number one, had to come up with this innovation to begin with, had to be thinking ahead whatever number of years that had to be in terms of where things were going that would need these type of applications. Where do you see this, I guess, ending? I'm thinking that at some point things like keys, things like doorknobs, things like various forms of even security of one kind or another will be driven by some form of touch or, as you point out, either motion or voice recognition. Maybe share with our audience a little bit of a little futurism in terms of what you see as far as the possibilities of the technology is concerned.
Yeah, sure. And before we look to the future, take a look at the last 5 years or so. Touch technology has grown into one of the biggest and fastest growing areas in the entire electronics industry. Right now, it's about a $13 billion market. It's projected to be up over $20 billion in just a few years, and that's because it's starting to show up in all these other places. You mentioned doorknobs. There's remote controls, mobile devices, automotive applications, medical devices, industrial devices. I mean, there's really no limit to where you can put this new technology. And I think there's a hunger to replace the way that we've been, interacting with electronic devices. So take a remote control, for example. It has a bunch of switches in it. So if you want to fast forward, you can't just press down harder on the fast forward button and fast forward faster. You have to hit that button 5 times and cycle through these discrete settings. So just a simple application like that shows how touch technology can improve the operation of the most simple device. And as it gets cheaper, it's going to become more prevalent.
Well, I can imagine with clothing and things like, Kurzweil talks about some of the micro aspects of even medical devices that can be internalized for exploratory purposes. Everything that we used to think in terms of science fiction, I can only begin to imagine how the elements that you're talking about in a Force Touch environment could be applied to things we haven't even begun to think about yet. So that's pretty fascinating and pretty exciting. I guess one last question has got to be, where do you see your company in the next few years? NextInput sounds to me like it's on a fast track. Got a lot of exciting foundation and infrastructure, both from a technology standpoint and from a management standpoint. Got any goals that you can share with us in terms of benchmarks over the next couple of years, next year or so?
Yeah, we're we've closed that seed round. We have some revenue targets that we want to hit this year, and it looks like we're going to hit them. And when we do that, we'll be teeing up a Series A round, a VC round. We'll be growing the team, be expanding our customer base, be expanding the application base. So we've started out with pretty simple applications, really force-sensitive buttons, kind of like that remote control I just described.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got this R&D strategy and plan that takes us all the way into the iPads and the iPhones of the future in the next 2 to 3 years. So we're really excited about just executing that plan.
When you went to the business launch competition, did you foresee this kind of success and this kind of traction? I guess were you a believer right from the get-go, or is it a case where you're enjoying the success, but is it a surprise?
It has been surprising in a lot of ways. When you're developing technology, there's always that question in the back of your mind, will this work? And until you make it work and you've shown customers and you kind of validated it with customers and people want to buy it, there's always sort of surprise and excitement that builds around it. So Yeah, it's
nothing like a little positive reinforcement to build a little confidence in terms that you actually have a viable and commercializable a product that can be actually commercialized. I can imagine. And again, what an exciting time. Again, from such a grassroots beginning, although I think from the education and the background and the environment that you came from, it probably was inevitable of one kind or another. What a great thing for us to know that a company with such a cutting-edge technology in such a leadership technology arena is coming out of Georgia. No real big surprise, but again, a reinforcement to the image that's getting built from our technology community. Boy, I can tell you that I'm sure that a lot of our audience and a lot of the TAG members join me in congratulating you on the job that you've already done, but also wishing you only continued success as we watch you build the company and grow. Thank you so much for taking time out of your exciting schedule and exciting events to join us for a few minutes here on Tech Talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank. I enjoyed being on.